The penultimate episode of Invincible Season 4 was an absolute banger. Watching Thragg aura farm while overlooking the full-scale battle between the Coalition and the Viltrumites with folded arms until his anger boils over enough to engage in battle was just marvelous. At least Invincible could make Thragg's nose bleed in the comics, because in the show, Thragg makes beating up the likes of Omni Man, Invincible, and the Great Thadeus look like a normal Wednesday. But now the planet of Viltrum is destroyed, Thragg and his remaining Viltrumite army is nowhere to be found. Not just that, he also left Mark and Nolan alive, which means that the Grand Regent certainly has some ulterior motive behind it. As you have already seen, Thragg is anything but forgiving, and there is no way he would let the Graysons go even after Nolan carried out the destruction of Viltrum. Mark's theory is that Thragg and his remaining Viltrumite warriors have gone to Earth. So of course, everyone is wrecking their heads about what can happen in the Season 4 finale, especially with the fate of the Earth at stake. So without wasting another moment, let's discuss what we could expect from the 8th episode of Invincible Season 4. We will see what Mark thinks would happen to Earth after Viltrumites took control of it. Given how easily it was for Thragg to best Nolan and Mark, it would take him and the remaining Viltrumites just a few days to destroy Earth and kill every living being that lives in it. Naturally, Mark is pretty much lost in the anxiety that has been making him have violent thoughts about all the possibilities of the Viltrumites being on Earth. He keeps picturing a bloody Pentagon littered with the bodies of all of Earth's heroes, while Cecile begs Thragg to let him live so he can help smooth things over by preparing the humans of Earth for Viltrumite rule. Of course, Thragg does not listen as Mark imagines him severing Cecile's head from his body before taking everything the Viltrumites need and destroying the rest there is. There is even a shot of Anissa severing Eve's head with a swipe of a hand. General Craig pulling Immortal's head out from his body and Thragg killing Debbie and Paul in order to seek his revenge from Mark. Honestly, these thoughts are anything but far-fetched, as the Viltrumites are fully capable of committing a genocide on Earth, especially after her own planet was destroyed by the Coalition heroes. Even though in the comics, Omni Man keeps insisting Mark to rest and fuel up before they could reach Earth, all he will be thinking about is what must be happening back at home. He is wise enough to understand that the only reason Thragg allowed Nolan and him to live is because the Grand Regent wanted to destroy them by hurting where it really hurts. So yeah, definitely expect Mark to spiral like crazy and lash out on his dad every time Nolan asks him to relax. We might get to witness Alan dealing with the pressure of his new promotion. By the end of Episode 7, Alan was already made the new head of Coalition of Planets until, of course, they find someone more qualified to replace him. The comics, however, did not have this tease, as Alan was directly given a job after Thaddeus' decapitation. In issue 77 of the comics, as Mark, Nolan, and Zack leave for Earth in the Coalition's fastest ship, we see the great Alan having all his belongings moved into his new home at the Coalition of Planets headquarters. When Telia tries to seduce him with the 20 minutes they have until the movers get in, he ignores her, leading her to try and comfort him about him constantly worrying about his friends. Telia assures him that the Viltrumites probably just went into hiding and won't be resurfacing for years, but unfortunately Alan no longer has the luxury of time that allows him to worry about the Viltrumites, as he now commands all the planets within the Coalition and has far too much to think about. Even then, a part of him is fixated about where the Viltrumites went, and even if he hated to admit it, Alan wanted them to go to Earth because at least, like that, he would know of their whereabouts. Not just that, he also misses Tech Jacket, as the two had become really great friends during the entire course of the Viltrumite War. Given how the show has been very particular about adding exclusive elements not adapted from the comics, I think Robert Kirkman will adapt this particular detail only to enhance Alan's responsibilities in order to help understand the kind of pressure he is under. Plus, Thaddeus had lived a long life before he formed a Coalition of Planets and also had some experience from the time he had a seat at the Viltrumite Council, as opposed to Alan, who truly is very new to the game. Mark will be encountering Thragg once again. So all the theories about Viltrumites hiding on Earth in plain sight are actually true, and issue 77 sort of validates that when Mark pulls the door to open the ship and decides to fly to Earth all by himself after hallucinating a scene where his mom and her boyfriend were brutally murdered by Thragg. But as he raced towards the planet, Mark was surprised to witness his homeworld at peace as people were going on about their day-to-day life. Nolan also followed after him and asked if Mark had seen any Viltrumites Viltrumites, but they were nowhere to be seen. For a split second, Mark even smiled in relief of Earth not becoming another Viltrumite colony, but like I said, that moment only lasted for a second, as both father and son turned their backs to see Thragg behind them, claiming how the Viltrumites were actually hiding among humans in plain sight. Before the Grand Regent could say anything more, Mark absolutely loses his mind. He goes in right for the kill before Thragg could do anything to his planet or his people. Mark still believed that if he could kill Conquest, he would find a way to kill Thragg, and even though Nolan tried to stop him, he did not listen. Of course, his attack had no effect on the guy, as Thragg grabs Mark by the throat and slings him aside. Honestly, I genuinely believe that the show's depiction of Thragg seems to be stronger, because at least Mark could make him bleed for a second in the comics, as opposed to him hurting his hand just by trying to punch Thragg's skull, who by the way did not even wince at it. What do you guys think? Thragg is going to have quite the talk with the Graysons in the season finale. So the show's version of Thragg already chooses to talk and negotiate before hitting the first punch, unlike the comic iteration, who goes directly for the kill. He even tried to offer Nolan forgiveness for his betrayal if he chooses to come back to Viltrum and join them, but when he did not agree, that is when Thragg made his first move by punching Nolan back to the vastness of space. Given that the show has already built that streak within Thragg by allowing us to witness his leadership skills, it won't be surprising to see the guy have another long chat with the Graysons, especially because that's what happens in the comics. While Mark tries to fight him, Thragg mentions how he was not alone on Earth, and if they even ended up injuring him, the remaining Viltrumites would lay waste to this entire planet to seek revenge. When he gives them the choice to fight or talk, the Grand Regent offers them a truce. As it turns out, there are only 37 Viltrumites left alive, and some of them were severely injured from the last battle. Even then, their numbers were enough to tear the planet in half and kill every living creature within, which would be fair retaliation according to Thragg, as opposed to what the Coalition did to Viltrum. But then he was not made a Grand Regent of the Viltrum Empire just for his thirst of revenge. Thragg was made rule in order to ensure the survival of Viltrumites, and keeping that in mind, he knew that if they tried to destroy Earth, it would not be a war they could survive. So instead, he proposed an offer where they would surrender and end war only if the Viltrumites were allowed to take over Earth peacefully. Of course, this fully triggers Mark, especially when Thragg mentions how the Viltrumites do not wish to leave. Now, my guess is, in the show, there will be a few more punches thrown from both Thragg and Mark before Nolan probably intervenes as the voice of reason, because the Amazon Prime series is clearly bloodier, violent, and more gore-filled than its comic counterpart. The Viltrumites will have already started to live a human life among humans by the time Mark gets back to Earth. So we know that Nolan and Mark were tuckered out for weeks before they fully healed and recovered from their battle with Thragg, as opposed to Oliver, who is still in the recovery process. Now, in the comics, we find out that by the time Nolan and Mark reach Earth, the 37 remaining Viltrumites have already started following the protocol that would help them replenish their ranks. Even though Mark calls Thragg insane for even thinking that he would allow Viltrumites to take over Earth, the Grand Regent asks him not to overreact and makes him note that Mark or Nolan, or any of Earth's heroes for that matter, could not even make them leave even if they wanted to. So, Thragg proposes that Mark lets the Viltrumites live among humans very quietly, as they, or anyone for that matter, would not even notice that they were there. Viltrumites would also have no contact with Mark or anyone, nor would they interfere with any of the matters on Earth, as they did not want their presence to be known. This basically meant that while the Viltrumites would not attack the humans, they would also not help in matters of crisis within the planet, as that would be the only way to ensure the survival of the remaining Viltrumites till they could restore their population over the course of 1,000 years. Thragg also explains that since human DNA is 100% compatible with Viltrumite DNA and has been proven to make near-perfect hybrids who are closest to being pure-blooded Viltrumites, he plans to carry on with this interbreeding till the children of the remaining Viltrumites go on to make more children who would all join the Empire for generations and swell up their army with the infusion of human DNA. Thragg even claimed how Nolan and Mark would have to provide their ultimate salvation even if they were responsible for the destruction of Viltrum. That was just how he needed things to be till their numbers were restored and their empire was rebuilt. Now, while Thragg explains everything to them, we witness the comic panels illustrating how the Viltrumites have already started to live on Earth among humans while pretending to be humans. As it turns out, Lucan is disguised in a pish-posh beige business suit as he is walking down the street, while Anissa is seemingly pissed at two men trying to flirt with her while sitting on a park bench. Craig, on the other hand, is seen disguising himself as a biker smoking a cigarette and using an eye patch to cover up his cybernetic eye. Mark will end up agreeing to Thragg's terms of surrender. As much as it pains me to say this, the Viltrumite War is actually one of the most frustrating and heartbreaking storylines of the Invincible lore, as there is truly no satisfying outcome of it. Even the truce is made under reluctant conditions, as both sides of the war had suffered a lot of damage to resume their fight again without completely eviscerating one another. That is why when Mark asks Thragg in the comics why they would even choose to wait and then resume their fight once again until after the Viltrumites are stronger, the Grand Regent mentions how he was allowing the Coalition and the Earth to have temporary peace. Mark already understood the consequences of fighting Thragg at this moment, so putting that off would be the wiser decision. Essentially, both sides are in a stalemate, because even with 37 Viltrumites alive, Mark was backed into a corner and did not have the upper hand that would allow him to strike out blindly at them. Even then, for a second, Mark goes into an absolute frenzy, because if he did end up allowing the Viltrumites to coexist with humans, he would basically be allowing a ticking time bomb to hide under their noses, ready to blow up at any given moment. That was not something Mark wanted to live with, as that would mean that he was signing the entire Earth up to live under the constant threat of a Viltrumite attack, thus risking civilian lives at all times. But unfortunately, he then realizes that not surrendering to Thragg's terms would basically mean that Mark had no option but to fight him to death as the other Viltrumites lay waste to Earth. So irrespective of this initial refusal, he had to reluctantly agree to Thragg's terms of surrender. And that, folks, brings us to the very end of this video. I'm honestly loving how Robert Kirkman is reinventing pre-existing storylines from the comics and enhancing them to fit into the show. Last week, every fan of the franchise was throwing shade at Thragg's character design, but really, it took minutes of seeing him in action to understand what an absolutely batshit crazy villain he is going to be. Having said that, what other exclusive new storylines do you wish to see in the next episode? Let us know your thoughts and opinions in the comment box down below. As always, like, share, and subscribe. A subscription is the best way to be updated on all our latest content. This is John of Marvelous Videos, and I'll be seeing you on the next one.